Ladies and gentlemen, little anecdote. Do you know how Warren Buffett tests that a microphone works? It's a true story. Like, I say 1, 2, 1, 2, he says 1 million, 2 million. True story. You can hear it. So I want to tell you two things. I believe that I don't come from the world of hotels, but I believe that you guys should not think of yourself as people operating hotels. You should think of yourself as people operating platforms that are moving around the key assets of the 21st century. Things like money, but also attention, relationships, identity, information, and I will explain how. The second thing is I believe that what's happening around us in terms of technological change and in terms of geopolitical change is making what people like you do more important than ever. So last week I was in Strasbourg. My grandmother lives there. And there's this hotel I always go with my wife and my kids. And I sent an email a few days earlier saying, hey, this is Mr. Haug. What price can you give me for a stay from Sunday to Monday? And the owner replied to me and said, oh, good news. You get a very good rate because it's 50% off. And so I was like, I told my wife, well, finally, it's been 2 years we go to this place. It's so amazing. Like, they finally gave us a discount. And when I came to the check-in, I wanted to thank the owner. So I told her, hey, by the way, thank you very much for giving us a discount. And she's like, oh, we didn't give you a discount. Every Sunday evening is 50% off. And then there was this like really awkward situation where I thought there was actual attention put on me, and she was trying to tell me that no, I wasn't special. Like, everybody gets the fucking discount because it's Sunday evening. And this is me. Like, I see relationships, I see care even when there is none, because I really like people. And I'm French, so I still like people after 40 years of interacting with French people. That tells you how much I love human beings, right? So my name is Laurent Haug. I live in Switzerland, between Lausanne and Geneva. And all my life, I was really into putting people together. And it started very early on. I was, before, when I was younger, Tinder did not exist, so I was Tinder. I would match people all the time. Many kids were born thanks to my matchmaking, and I always liked, connecting ideas and people. And I ended up starting a big conference in Switzerland in 2006. To discuss this collision between technology and society, because I thought it was a very important topic, and I believe that change is an opportunity as long as you anticipate it. So I wanted to talk about that. And this became quite an adventure. We started in Switzerland. The next year, we're in Switzerland and South Korea. Then we went back to France, southern France. And it was one of the first events that was, breaking boundaries between the different fields. Like, there were artists and designers and sociologists and business people, etc. And it was also exploring a lot of topics that were not necessarily, at the time, understood to be related to technology, like culture, like identity, like privacy, etc. And a couple of years ago, after I turned this page of my life, I decided I'm going to write a book about this experience, because a lot of people were asking me about advice about making their own event. And so I took my wife and kids. We flew to the US. We stayed there on the coast of Oregon for 3 months, because that's where my wife's family comes from. And I started to write a book it was called The Art of the Conference. And when I was writing it, I realized that there is actually maybe something much bigger behind, and maybe conference was not the right word. So from my focus on, we call it like TED-like events, I started to talk to the music festival people. And I thought, they do exactly the same job. It's just that, their medium is music. My medium is talk, but it's the same job. And then I started to talk to the people with circus background. Then I started to talk to opera singers. Then I started to talk to museums. Then I started to talk to people managing airports and NGOs and schools and universities and incubator. And everywhere I was looking, I could see that these were the same organizations doing the same things, except nobody had really told them that they were doing the same job. And one day I stumbled on this project called La Granja Ibiza. And I wasn't sure what it was, because it seemed to be a hotel with like some events going on and some experiences and kind of a co-living space. I wasn't sure what it was. It was called a hotel, but I thought, this definitely belongs to the kind of things I'm exploring. And that's where my work kind of reconnected with your world. And I think that hotels are like events. They are like museums. They are like schools, like accelerators. They are platforms, for lack of a better word, where basically all these assets are flowing and being brokered. And I believe that hotels, for example, don't really have a boundary. It's very hard to define where a hotel stops and starts. Like when 2 or 3 days before I arrive somewhere, I start finding information about the location I'm going to. The experience is already starting, although physically I'm not there. And after I left, maybe the experience can continue. So the boundaries of these organizations are not very, very clear. But they are very important. And I believe that in the past, the way a hotel was interacting with the world was, I give you money and you give me a service. That was the old model. So we're going to get rid of this word because we don't really like it. And we're going to see what are the assets that are going through these platforms. And the first one, I think, is identity. I talked, for example, to the people of the World Economic Forum, and they have this thing called like young global leaders, whatever that means, but it's an identity they give you. So the platform is making you something. When you go to TED, you become a TED speaker. When you go to the Olympics, you become an Olympian. And in a way, when I go to a hotel, I get a piece of the identity of this place into me. When I talk to others, it's not the same if I say, I'm going to a design hotel, or if I say I'm going to the, cheap hotel. My identity is attached to where I go. You actually trade identity with stakeholders. For example, when a star comes to your hotel, then you get a bit of their identity. You became the place where Brad Pitt stays. My stepdaughter, who's 18 years old, she's currently interning at a 5-star hotel close to Geneva. And when she's going to come at the door of hospitality school in Lausanne that she wants to do, she's going to have a bit of the identity of this hotel on her resume. She will be somebody who did an internship at this hotel. And Klaus was saying earlier how I think the concept of identity is really changing. And to me, I'm a geek, and there is an analogy I could use. I think our identity used to be folders, and now it's tags. I don't know if it resonates with you, but folders, a file can be in one folder, not two. There's one place. This used to be our identities. Now, identity is more like tags in the sense that I can have many identities, and my identity is defined by the places I go to, the things I do, the music I listen to, the food I eat, the people I hang out with. Why? Because we ended up, all of us, moving around, most of us at least, and disconnecting ourselves from what used to be your identity, which is where you're born and where you live. And I interviewed the so-called director of the Olympic Games. He's the guy who's in charge of the games, of making the games happen. And I was asking, like, why are countries competing so hard? Are cities competing so hard to, do such a costly thing? And he was telling me that he had a conversation with François Hollande, the former French president, who told him, what I'm seeking when we apply for the Olympic Games is that you give us a common project, something that we all look forward to, and something that we take all our energies into a common direction. And in a way, something that defines our identity as, a country that can overcome challenges. So I think identity is a very, very interesting thing to trade with your ecosystem. Platforms, whether you're an event, or a hotel, or a museum, maybe a school. Schools should do more of that. Experience is also something you exchange. And experience is becoming increasingly important thanks to technology. In a way, it's very hard to define experience. You say, it's emotions, it's touching stuff. I talked to the guy who's in charge of organizing the Champions League final. He was telling me that they are working on smell. When you get into the stadium, that there are some smells that welcome you, and so all your senses are being involved. So experience is a lot of things. It's losing a bit of meaning. Nobody's very sure what it is. But there's one way to define experience. It's what technology cannot synthesize, what technology cannot trick your brain into thinking. And I interviewed people from Cirque du Soleil, super interesting project. And she was the head of casting, Muriel Quentin. And she was telling me, I was like, how did you guys become such a massive player in this field where there are so many other people competing? It's like, it's very simple. All the other circus, they were focused on themselves. Like if someone was making like 3 jumps, I'm gonna do 4. So they forgot one thing, which is that you need to give an experience to the audience. And she was telling me how the basic principle of Cirque du Soleil is we want to connect with the audience, we want them to have a special experience. And when she was looking for performers, I was asking her, like, how do you recognize talent? She said, it's only one thing. Whatever you do is that you go inside the heart of people and you collect something and you wake up something and they start to feel an emotion. And you can do it any way you want. In their last shows in Las Vegas, she told me they spent like tens of millions making some machinery and pyrotechnics and smoke, etc. And then everybody was crying at one time when there was this woman coming and dancing on stage. And like the barest experience was actually the most intense one. So there are no rules, but there are no rules on how to make experience, but it's definitely here. I talked to music festival people. For example, Montreux Jazz, great event. And the CEO was telling me, I will never be able to compete with these festivals where you have 200,000 people. I only have 3,000 in the auditorium. So he's focusing on giving musicians the best possible experience so that he compensates maybe for not being able to pay them as much as other festivals. I talked to the founder of Paleo, which is the largest music festival in Europe. Very few people know about it. It's happening in Switzerland, in Nyon. And he was telling me he's putting extra attention into the experience of the volunteers, because you have these people who spend like 1 week at a festival, very tiring jobs. But he's really focusing on them. And so when you go there, you feel that the staff, there's a special atmosphere because their experience is designed. I interviewed the former CEO of the World Economic Forum, who now runs Geneva Airport. And he was telling me, one of the big problems we have at the World Economic Forum is that we intellectually, it's very easy for us to connect to people. Hey, there is this global warming thing. And he said that they realized that the only way they could get people to act was if they were able to touch their heart and create an emotion. And the emotion was kind of the fuel that was allowing the movement to happen. So experience is very important. And I also talked to someone who's now working at Havas in Paris. And he's someone who left advertising 6 or 7 years ago to take over the event business of his corporation. And he was telling me, live experience is the last moment where you can actually have everybody's attention for more than 20 seconds. And that's why I believe, experience is a really key asset that you guys need to create and trade with your ecosystem, because it cannot be replaced, and it really counterbalances all the Twitter feed in the world. A third asset, relationships. This one is very complicated, very key. It's funny how social media tricks us into thinking that we have relationships with people. Like on Facebook, I either don't know you or you're my friend. So it's like the world is very binary, We have no relationship or we have a deep relationship. You're my friend. And so we live in this illusion of relationship all the time. Well, actually, there are different stages. First, I have no idea who you are. Second, I'm aware of you. Third, I pay attention to you. Fourth, we're connected. And 5, we have a relationship. And one of the big problems we have today is that we no longer have relationships, I believe, or very, very few. We are connected to people. We are connected to hundreds of thousands of people. But when we disagree with them, we block them. That's not a relationship. A relationship is when we disagree, we fight, we argue, but then we settle and we continue. That's a relationship. And I believe that relationships are very important, especially in your context, because this is what is going to allow you to fight the commoditization that some players of the industry are trying to create with you. When I travel for business, I go to some price comparison website, I type the name of a city, and then there's this line, endless list of hotels fighting for my attention. But I have no connection to any of them. If I had, I wouldn't be comparing prices. And this is why it's a key asset for you, because relationships are a sort of life insurance. I interviewed someone who ran an online grocery store, and he started it in '96 in Switzerland. Switzerland is a very conservative country. Although the web was invented in Geneva by Tim Berners-Lee, digitalization is barely happening in Switzerland since maybe 2 or 3 years. So he was way ahead of the curve. So they really struggled for 15 years before he sold the company. And he told me that he had such a deep relationship with his suppliers that when he ran out of cash, for the first time ever, these large corporations, the food industry corporation, helped him, and they lent him some money. And that's what relationships can do for you. Relationships are very important also because this is what enables us to do things. I interviewed someone who's a specialist of running workshops. And I was telling him, his name is Felix Koch. Felix, what is the secret to a good workshop? Why do some workshops work and others don't? And he does something very hard. He brings cooperation with their clients, so people who don't know each other. And he was telling me, the only thing you need to do if you want a productive workshop is that you make it in a way that people care for each other. You create a relationship between them, and there they're going to be productive. So relationships are the prerequisite to action, to movement, to innovation, to improvement of your experience. How many times will a guest tell you when they leave, you ask, was it good? They're like, yeah, it was good. And and if they really knew you, they say, dude, I'm sorry, but there's this I can hear the noise of the bar during the night, and blah, blah, blah. And these relationships lead to truthfulness, for example, which is so important when you run a business. Another key asset is information. This one can have many names, content, data. You are on the ground, and you know how people feel, you know what they need, you know your neighborhood. And this is a very important asset you have. I don't believe that the world can be reduced to equations. I do believe it for music, part of it, but not for how we feel or why we do things. In a way, digitally, we're totally blind. You go and you check, 24% of people dropped out at the last step of your checkout process. What the hell are you supposed to do with such an information? Why did they drop out? because it's too expensive, because the phone rang, because their wife just gave birth to, they had to run to the hospital. You have no clue. And you guys are on the ground, and you have this data, and this data is extremely valuable. Extremely valuable. You have insights, you know things before the rest of the world knows them, if you pay attention, if you listen to weak signals from your community, from your clients. And you have stories. And stories are tools. Stories can create emotion and push people forward. So platforms like museums are going to put their information, their content into motion to help their communities, to educate people, to raise big social issues. A conference like PopTech, which maybe you know, kind of on the East Coast, ID conference, is working with brands who want to have access to tomorrow's trends, to trendsetters. And so PopTech kind of resells the information of its own community. So it's definitely an asset you can trade. And so local information like the one you guys have is extremely, extremely useful. And I remember going to India once, and I was speaking at a conference, and they put me in this like super fancy 5-star hotels, with, I was basically barricaded inside. It was in Hyderabad. And I asked the guys can you recommend some things I could do? I was there with my wife, and because they thought I was a traveler that liked 5 stars and liked being in the bunker and enjoying being in the spa while I could see some people really struggling in the street. They recommended me please don't go out, don't go out. And they just didn't have the right information in a way that this is not what I needed. And this is how knowing your neighborhood at all different levels so you can direct people is a key asset you trade as a hotel. Attention. This one could have been called visibility. Attention is very important. So, Klaus today traded attention of his community with me, in a way. What I'm getting from being here is that I'm getting your attention and your time, and it's very valuable. TED doesn't pay speakers because they give you massive amount of attention. Why do corporations have to pay speakers when they come and talk to their executive committee? Because there is no attention to get. There is no visibility. There's going to be no publication online that results in millions of views and then people calling you for more work, for example. Why do certain sports love the Olympics? Because it's the only moment they have attention. If you do, rowing or curling, the only time there's going to be a TV camera at one of your competition is at the Olympics. So that's why the Olympic doesn't have to pay the athletes, because they pay them with attention. Paleo, the music festival I was mentioning earlier, is actually trading the attention of their community with schools. You have design school students who are doing projects, and now they say, you do the projects, but we showcase them during our festival. And suddenly everybody wins. The students do something that is very meaningful because they have the attention, potential attention of 300,000 people showing up and climbing on whatever they've done. I organized an event called 200 Ideas, and there were students helping us put the event together. And I told every one of them, you give me your resume, and we're going to put in the gift bag. And every single attendee left with the resumes, the CVs of all the students. And most of them found internships. They gave me their time. I gave them attention. So this is where you guys, maybe you're familiar with that, but this idea of building your own media, the capacity for people to listen to what you have to say. Attention is not about speaking. Attention is about people listening to what you're saying. Very different. Ties back to relationships. But this is where you guys should have, social media presence and your own media channels. And then you should make sense, do things so that people talk about you. It's what we call the earned media. And when none of the above works, paid media, like advertising. But attention is definitely a key asset. And the last one is money. And money is not very interesting, in a way, because everybody has money. And I'm not saying that in the sense of everybody has deep pockets. I'm saying that your money and my money look the same. It's very hard to make a difference with money. But it's still something that gets traded in this platform. For example, Burning Man. I talked to Marianne Godel, the CEO. Maybe she was the person with you last year. And Burning Man kind of gathers financial resources and then gives it back to artists so that they can work. So, movies flowing around, and it's definitely an asset. And so once you kind of put all the assets that are moving into these platforms like this, you can start to get to work and build your model. So the first thing you can do is say, okay, I'm going to focus on making my hotel or my platform better on every single of these key assets. So how can we bring more money? Money is like the blood. It's what allows you to do things. So you put your head down and think, how can we increase our financial assets? You get attention. How can we develop our own media? How can we develop our earned media? How can we get more people to talk about us? Information. What is the information available? What is the information that only I have? What is the data that I have? What are the stories I can tell? What are the relationships I can build? And around you, there are a lot of different kinds of people. You have your guests, you have your workers, you have your suppliers, you have your community, you have the media, you have, online influencers, stars. There's a lot of people. So you can focus on saying, like, how do we find the people that are relevant to us, and how do we build relationships with them? Experience, how do we give our guests a better experience? I know it's a line of thought that is already very present in you. And identity. How do we become an identity that we can share with others? And how can we ride the identity of others? Like I saw in Kentucky, there's a hotel who's becoming an art showroom. And so, the identity of the artist kind of overflows on the hotel. So there's an exchange of identity. So that's the first way of thinking with this model. The second way is that you think in terms of your stakeholders. So what is the exchange you're going to do with your clients? So your client is going to give you some money. Maybe they're going to give you some attention because maybe they have, 10,000 followers on Instagram. And when they're going to do pictures, some attention from them is going to be brought to you. Maybe they don't want you to give them attention if they're somebody very famous. Information. What data can you get from your customers? What information can you give them? Relationships, same thing. Experience, identity. So you look at every person, every type of stakeholder, and you design an exchange with them. And you will see that everybody has different needs. And everybody is going to have a different mix of these assets. Like, my stepdaughter, as an intern, she's not getting any money. She's not getting any attention. She's getting some information. She's getting some relationships. And she's getting a lot of experience. And because she's getting a lot of experience, she's not getting any money. And a bit of identity, too. So you see a bit how this works. And it's really about creating exchanges that are unique. Every single stakeholder will have a unique mix that are fair. It has to balance out, and that's why it's so hard. Like, what's the value of my identity? What's the value of the relationships I bring you? What's the value of the information I bring you? Very hard to say. But still, if you look carefully, this is what happens. There is a real exchange where the perceived value received has to be, for the client at least, less than what they gave. And I think you need to be associated with a theme. You see that every one of these platforms I talk to is associated with something. University is associated with learning. Airports are associated with traveling. And as a hotel, I think you really need to work out that somehow when people think of whatever you want to achieve with them, maybe you want them to disconnect, or maybe you want them to relax, or maybe you want them to work, or maybe you want them to fast. But whatever theme you want to project, that as soon as they think about that, they think about you. And also, I think that these assets allow you to have a more continuous relationship. The problem you have the same problem that event people. The key issue of event people is that we exist in the life of our audiences for 1 2, 3 days max, and then we totally vanish. And that's the genius of these events, who like make videos of everything that happens and then like spreads it over the year. Why? Because it allows them, instead of not existing in people's life, existing a lot for 3 days, then not existing again for 1 year, it allows them to exist a little bit every day. And so it's much easier for people to keep you in mind that, oh my gosh, I need to relax. Let's go back to this place. So this is a bit the model that I saw, and accidentally I ended up hopefully stumbling on something that is going to be useful for you. I told you that the geopolitical events makes this very relevant. And I'm saying that because I believe that behind almost every single social problem we have right now, there is an absence of relationships. I helped refugees find work in Switzerland. I would sit down with them for 1 hour, write a profile, publish it online, and they would most of the time find a job. And so there are these people whose life has really changed for the better thanks to that. And they tell me, thank you so much for doing this. I'm like, it's not a one-way thing. Like, I didn't do something for you and it stopped here. You also did something for me. And what you did for me is that now when I hear the word refugee, I can put a name. Say, it's not refugee, it's Kinan, it's Mohammed, it's all these people I helped. And so just by connecting with their reality, I'm not afraid of them anymore. And I believe that if people want to build walls to, hide from their neighbors, it's maybe because they don't spend enough time with their neighbors. There's a study that shows that the doctors, you become a radiologist when as a doctor, you just don't want to talk to human beings, because radiologists just look at pictures. They did a study, they showed that when you actually add to a print the portrait of the patient, the radiologist is going to get more involved and give a better diagnostic. I believe that schools have a big problem, because school is like a conveyor belt. School doesn't look at us as individuals. It looks at us as numbers that needs to be carried to, a predetermined career. Everywhere, the absence of relationship is giving us like massive, massive problems. Global warming. It's because the consequences are so far away from us. Like, who the hell relates with, whatever happened at the other end of the planet? But if you have a relative who lives there, then suddenly you care. So the relationship really changes your perspective. So I believe that you are part of a movement to create relationships, and that is going to have a massive global impact. But when I was in Strasbourg, I was visiting my grandmother, who's 89 years old, and it's very hard for her to move. And she lost her sight, unfortunately, a few years ago. And when you talk to her, I took her, my daughters were horse riding, and she touched the horses, and she remembered riding a horse as a kid. And so she told us about this memory, and I could see that, experiences were really one of the few remaining things she had in her. So it's very meaningful on a personal level. And also now, all her friends, most of her friends died, and she constantly has people visiting her. And, she says, thank you for visiting me. I'm like, oh, it's not really about thank you. It's more that, you took care of us when we were younger and when we needed it, and now we give it back to you. And so basically, all she has now is the experiences she had, and that she can go back to remember the good times, and its relationships. So I believe there are a lot of reasons for people like you to focus on these assets, focus on bringing this to your communities, and perhaps if you work on creating relationships with your clients, with your communities, then you're really pushing society forward in many, many ways. Thank you very much.